Welcome, Outlaws.
Battlefield finds a new destiny. Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I am your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, is one Mr. Chris Figs. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you, bud?
I'm doing quite all right. We've had some pre-show fun. Now let's carry that fun into the main show. Go ahead and start this by saying, if you're new to the show, first and foremost, welcome. We are a PlayStation podcast, so we are a gaming podcast that looks at the gaming industry through the lens of being PlayStation fans. Though Chris and I do play on the other consoles or PC whenever we see fit, if we see so fit, but we do primarily play on PlayStation. So we're not necessarily here to just crap all over everyone else, but we offer criticism and praise to all as we feel it is needed. With that in mind, we usually start this show by talking about the games we've been playing, but before we get into that, we are going to end up talking today about Star Wars Outlaws getting a new trailer and a release date. EA Motive is sliding into the battlefield, and Destiny 2 comes back around after a somewhat disappointing time period, to really wow, apparently, all the player base who have maybe been on the rocks, maybe not. You can tell us if you're a big Destiny fan. But before we get into all that, we are going to start this show off the way that we always do, like I said, by looking into what Chris and I have been playing so that we can give you either the next game that we think you should play. We can either scare you away from a game you might have thought you liked, but turns out you wouldn't, or any of the variations of what could come from there. So, Chris, I noticed that you snuck in a platinum this week.
I did sneak. Talk about sneaking it in. I got it at like 6:50 today p.m. So snuck in fact, right before the show. But yes, I've finally finished Helldivers 2. I beat that platinum. I want to throw a big shout out to Sean, who comes up on the show a lot, but also Sweet Gran Turismo Jones, who both of them joined my game. To be fair, didn't invite them in. They joined, more than happy. But I was just grinding trivials to get this platinum out of the way. And like, there were a couple people who joined on me and like played 2 matches and then must have just been like, yeah, I'm not doing this. Because like when I was doing it
your
today,
last trophy was also having to do 100 missions. Yeah.
So like today, like when Ryan joined in on me, I was doing trivials and killing myself. So I would just, all I would do was launch down onto the objective. So it would like destroy the
illegal broadcast
speaking or whatever.
Yeah.
All I would do was call down a hell bomb, do the hug emote. So I'm standing with my arms wide open and then just blowing up. And it would complete the mission. Then you kill yourself 4 times, you still get a mission complete, and it takes a minute and a half. So I did that 11 times before I started, and I appreciate those who stuck with me.
Because I was just doing the objective and immediately running to extraction.
That's how I started it, and then I was like, this has to be faster to just cook a grenade and kill myself.
I ended up having enough times where noobs would join me, and so I just became a shepherd, like people call it Destiny 2, where people that don't know how the raids go, you get a shepherd and somebody who can walk you through and knows the raid well enough. That's basically what I was doing with Helldivers, is I'm just shepherding new people. Here's this thing. So that part was kind of fun, but I guess I could have been a little more efficient. But that's okay, because I helped a new generation of democracy,
My entire motivation was, I want to say I got the platinum on the show, because I'd already written the document and put that I had the platinum. So I'm like, I'm going to get the platinum on the show before the show starts.
Otherwise someone's going to listen and be like,
he actually did that after recording. But no, big shout out to those who stuck around for a bit. I know, and that was part of it today, where like when Ryan joined me, I was like, my mic is muted. I'm watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine and typing the news for the show while I kill myself. I'm not going to talk to you, but if you want to get this free XP, you're more than welcome to hang out. Like, that was kind of how it was for me. So he played a couple games and then left. But yeah.
So yeah, that's funny.
I'm done with Helldivers for a bit. I'm done with it.
Yeah, I took a good break from it. I may play again this week, but I haven't played in about a week now. So
I want to play Helldivers. Like, to be clear, I want to play it. I don't want to play it right now. I played a lot of Helldivers. I got the platinum. I'm gonna go play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Move on from Helldivers for a bit.
All right. Well, since you've given up Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, let's move to that for a second before we get to your what I'm sure is going to be your weekly one. So you finally decided to hop into Rebirth after you were just, chomping at the bit.
I did.
I noticed that in the effort of this, you decided to forego Crisis Core and some of these other things. So where did you decide to give up on 7, the classic 7, before you decided to hop into Rebirth? Did you beat it? I assume the answer is no.
I didn't beat it. I do want to be clear. I didn't give up on it. I do still plan to go back.
Temporary pause.
Well, look, here's the thing. And maybe this is a motivational message for everybody, right? I wanted, Sean, if you're listening, I love you. I wanted to play these games so that the next time I talk to Sean or even you or anyone about this game, I couldn't get hit with, well, you didn't play Crisis Core and you didn't watch the fucking UMD only movie, so you actually can't have an opinion that you like the Whispers. So that was my entire motivation, where I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm going to Platinum 7. I'm going to Platinum Crisis Core. I'm going to Platinum Remake. And then when I come and tell you, I like the Whispers, it's totally fine. And you go, well, you don't have the context. I'd be like, fuck you. I have all of the context. I have more context than you because I spent $40 on fucking Dirge of Cerberus. Go fuck yourself. I know everything. So that was my whole entire motivation.
I would have sent you my Dirge of Cerberus. You know how long I've had some of your games? I would have just been like, bro, here, just send it back when you're done.
To be clear, I didn't buy Dirge of Cerberus. But when I sent you that message, I was ready to buy Dirge of Cerberus because I was in a Final Fantasy VII mode, but I was also in the mode of I had been told that I didn't know enough, so I couldn't say that I liked the Whispers. So I was like, I'm going to do all of it.
I know all of the Final Fantasy stuff, and I like the Whispers, and that's why I think it's really funny when people are like, so. Someone's tried hitting me with that too, and I'm like, bro, I played 7 when I was a kid. I've played 7 again as an adult. I've played Crisis Core. I've played Dirge of Cerberus. I fucking watched the movie Advent Children when it came out, both on Blu-ray and on fucking PSP UMD. I know. I've seen it all. I know, my guy. And that's why I think it's so funny that it's like, anytime that someone has such a strong opinion like that, I think it's so ridiculous that with the same amount of information, you just have to be wrong that you like this thing that they clearly don't like, because their opinion has to be the one true real opinion. And I'm like, why can't it just be? It makes sense for me. If you think about how I am with things, I've already said the whole reason I didn't feel like watching The Last of Us TV show is because it's too close to the original already. And I just played the original like 3 months prior. Yeah. If anything, I would love the Whispers, because they completely represent that, hey, you're playing something that you're familiar with, but we're going to fuck around with it a whole lot.
Well, I like that it's clearly a meta commentary on everyone asking for a Final Fantasy VII remake. And the Whispers are clearly the developers trying to protect the sanctity of the original game, but everyone keeps asking them, please make a remake. So they remade the game, but they changed everything, and the Whispers are the embodiment of the developer saying, we don't want to change anything, and we don't want to touch and sully a classic of the past, but you guys won't stop fucking asking us, so we're going to make a sequel that we're going to pretend is a remake, and everyone's going to be happy.
One of my favorite things about the discourse around Final Fantasy VII is that it is blatantly obvious to me that all the people who are bitching about the things that they changed in Rebirth would be bitching about the things they didn't change if all they did was take Final Fantasy VII, put it in better graphics, and then left every single thing else the same. And moved it over. They'd be like, well, why didn't y'all do this? Why didn't you do this quality of life? And it'd be like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that's why I much prefer a group of developers just goes, fuck it, we wanted to make something. We decided we're going to make it.
And look, slight spoilers for the title screens of both games, but Aerith doesn't even have the same name. So clearly these aren't the same games. It's Aerith and Aerith. These are not the same people.
I'm really surprised. I didn't play. I didn't play I know they wouldn't have, because why would they? The whole way they did that was just essentially emulating the original. But that implies to me that Aerith's name is still Aeris in the PlayStation 4 version of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised because Kingdom Hearts was the first thing after 7 where they decided to have Aerith in, and they were like, yeah, we're going to fix this naming error that made its way to the US. So
Kingdom Hearts timeline of the Final Fantasy VII story, she's named something different too. Wow.
Yeah. And dude, if you would have seen the fucking fury back when Kingdom Hearts 1 came out and people were like, Aerith, and they're like, no, it's Eris.
Eris is a better name. I like that way better. You know, I can't even say anything else. But look, going back to why I started playing.
Is far closer to Earth, which is supposed to be a play into the role of her people.
I'm not going to say, for spoiler reasons, why Eris is a better name.
Because she's an heiress?
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it, but look at that. It's clearly the better name. Look, the reality is the reason I started Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is because I wanted to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I was tired of not playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
So right now, I'm assuming you've barely started.
I'm still... Chapter literally... 1? Oops.
Damn it, Chris. You're gonna make me edit this so much. Just give a goddamn chapter. Are you in chapter 1?
Yes, I'm in chapter 1. It's the first 5 minutes, dude. We can't even talk.
But the first 5 minutes are a big... First of all,
that's what I was going to say. I can't even ask you about the first 30 seconds of the game. Because the first 30 seconds, I was like, I didn't think that was... I don't understand that. And that was where I got hit with, well, go play Crisis Core. No. I'll do it after.
I did notice that you bought Crisis Core. I was looking through your games earlier.
I did. It was on sale. And in that mode, I was like, I'm doing it. That's the thing. I want to do it because we've talked about on the show. I always fall off it, but I want to go through and play all the games. And I think it would be dope as fuck to platinum all the games. But like the reality is I want to at least try them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to play something else in between it. But Crisis Core is on my list of upcoming games, and it's probably a game I'm going to attempt to platinum because it's about 40 to 50 hours to platinum.
Yeah, it's like 40 hours.
It's tedious. I know what they are because I did all the side content on PSP when I was a poor kid who didn't have enough money for games and was just, so obsessed with Final Fantasy VII that I was willing to do fucking squats, to beat a side mission and bullshit. But dude, I'm gonna tell you, 90% of those side missions fucking suck. And it's not that they suck; they're just uninspired because they're just meant to be a way to increase playtime for people who want that.
Yeah,
that's it.
Those fucking squatting challenges and remake. Good God, did you beat them?
Yeah,
dude. Hold
on. I beat the ones that it forces you to beat. I didn't beat the ones that are platinum.
Oh no, I went back. I got the trophy for the squat
because I knew I wasn't gonna get the platinum anyway.
The bicep curl or whatever. But I got it was the squats. But I got the one for the pull ups. I was like, this is so hard. If this wasn't Tifa, I wouldn't do this.
My man.
Well, she's just doing it's this hot woman going for like fucking. It took me an hour, so it was an hour of her being disappointed by clouds.
It's like a weird rhythm game, if I recall. I think it's very similar to a part in Rebirth, where it's just like you see on-screen prompt, and then as you keep going up with it, it'll just eventually disappear, and you're like, "Oh shit, the pressure's on." Yeah.
It also gets faster. So that was what was really hard, is because it goes away and then it continues getting faster. But then you continue getting faster, and eventually you get too fast. And then
you'll just fuck up and you'll restart. Right. Yeah.
But that would only happen to me in the last one. And the last one is like, I don't remember the guy's name, with the like androgynous bodybuilder or whatever.
Carrot Top?
Yeah, Joey or something like that. Whatever.
I can't remember his name, but I call him Carrot Top. He obviously looks like he's inspired by Carrot Top.
The androgynous bodybuilder is the right way to describe them because that's clearly the design. But regardless, like it's that battle and they're just wrecking me. And then eventually they'll fall right at the end. So it was whatever. I got it done. But yeah, that was a rough mini game. But yeah, I really like Rebirth. It's been really good so far.
That's cool. I'm ready to see you play a little more into it because I am going to give. I don't want to go too far into it, but I want to go ahead while we're talking about it. I played Rebirth and beat it finally because I think I remember telling you that I ran into that weird, accidentally chose the wrong thing because the wording is terrible. And it was so nice to see the game through to the end. And without getting too far into spoilers, I both like aspects of the game so much, and I think a few things could have been delivered better. And I think a few things they said certain things prior to the game's release that in hindsight of beating the game, I do not understand what they possibly meant or why they even thought it was a good idea to do that when what they said I don't feel like was honored at all.
Really?
It's like making a sandwich and having ham in it, and then making a post about how you want ham in the sandwich to really mean something, and then you give me the sandwich and it turns out there's no ham in it, and you're like, yeah, okay, but my statement about ham's still important. It's like, no, it's not. It has nothing to do with how you decided to handle this game.
I thought it was really weird when they killed Sora in the end.
I'm telling you, when Sora died in the middle of, and Virum Rex showed up, and I was like, what's going on here? Yeah, and then Leon from Resident Evil 2 shows up, and he goes, there's no time to explain.
Well, did you hear in the credits, right? This was huge. I saw this going around on Reddit. If you listen in the background and you reverse it, you hear Commander Shepard say, "This is my favorite remake on the Citadel."
It's fucking stupid. But yeah, Rebirth is it's kind of that game frustrated me a bit towards the end. Look, here's the thing: JRPG end games are always cool. They're frustrating because if you fuck up, you have to go. There's just so much fighting that you're having to do, but they're so cool. And even seeing the moments again, you're kind of like, I want to skip this, but I also don't because it's sick as shit. And you're just kind of in this conflicted feeling. But I was so glad to beat it and then actually get the context of what they were trying to do at the end. I still think that they belied with their message what they actually ended up going with, but. Yeah, it's not a perfect game, and it never was. No game really is, but
Arkham Asylum is.
Arkham City is. Arkham Asylum's very close though, so I can't blame you. Or it's also perfect. It's just like one stage of perfect less than City. Are you okay with that comparison at least?
They're equally perfect.
I'll give it to you. Fine.
Okay.
They're equally perfect while I have a preference for one. Exactly.
There you
go. Yeah.
Right. Margot Robbie and Sydney Sweeney are both hot, but there's one I'd choose over the other. It's that simple. It's Sydney Sweeney.
So, yeah, Rebirth was. I'm glad to be past it, but because of the little bit of frustration I had with that game, like I said, I didn't play it for a week. I was just kind of like, I don't fucking care enough right now.
What's funny because I had
urge to come back around to it.
I had the same issue in Remake when you fight Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, because I died at the end too, and then it starts you at the beginning.
It's actually pretty.
It's not far.
It's pretty apt.
It starts you right when you have to go through the portal, and I was like, I don't want to, because there's like 6 cutscenes and there's like 7 battles. And it's
cool.
Literally,
it's like,
yeah, it's cool, but I've done that in Pokemon where they leave and then I have to go chase them again. It's the same fucking thing.
Here they are. Wait, no, they're not.
Right. Your legendary dogs in another castle.
My frustration with Rebirth is actually the reason that I am not going to start Crisis Core now that I've beaten the other game I was playing. But before we get to what I was playing, besides Rebirth, you don't have much more to say about that, I'm sure.
No.
What's the weekly update on MLB The Show?
I love MLB. I play that game every year. I've said it, my fifth year in a row getting the platinum in that game. It's weird because it's very boring and I can't stop playing it. And I don't even know if boring is the right way to describe it, but there's a lot of time. And again, this is why, as much as I make fun of Destiny, and when we get to the news, I make fun of Destiny in the news, but I get it because I'm only playing MLB to unlock better cards so that my team is better, so that I can send pictures of my cool team to my friends who play MLB. Right. So that's the thing. But like playing it, there are times where I'm like, I want to kill myself.
Chris, there were times when we were doing the Destiny 2 Platinum.
Oh yeah.
Where I literally was like, do I really want this platinum this bad? But then you start getting into that lost time fallacy where you're like, but I'm already like 40 hours into this new excursion of probably another 100 hours into fucking Destiny 2. And if I leave without the platinum, I might as well kill myself.
Right. Dude, that was probably the worst I've ever felt getting a trophy. Oh, God. But regardless, I'm trying to get, it was terrible. Fuck Destiny 2. I was trying to get these cards, and it was just playing games that were meaningless. Like, it's mini seasons, right? So you're playing for a championship, you're doing all these stuff to try and get packs. Right. So it tells me how long I played it. So I played that mini season for 10 hours. And there was a lot of like, I write while I'm playing MLB, I'll just pause it, I'll write a couple paragraphs, move and play. So it's not all 10 hours. But 10 hours, according to the game of my life, was spent playing games that mean nothing to me. I don't even remember them. But at the end, I got a bunch of packs and I pulled a diamond that I needed, and it was worth it.
Dude, that relationship with games that have these components is a really hard thing to communicate, to explain to someone on the outside of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know it well because I've not played very many games with things like that. But I at least know it enough to have it as a touchstone that I can kind of understand.
Yeah.
But dude, because that is crazy. Once a game starts getting to a point where I'm playing for like 2 or 3 hours, and not once in those 2 or 3 hours have I actively had some sense of fun. I start getting this sense of like Voss talking to me in Far Cry 3 when he's like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
It's weird because like, as much as I say meaningless, like there's a lot of things to it, right? Like my parallel XP goes into that, which obviously you as not a player, you don't know, but like you get the cards, and the more you play with those cards, you level them up, right? So like I have a parallel 5 Zach Greinke card. So the base stats on him are all up by 5. So it takes that card from an 89 rank to, I think it's a 93. So not a great card, but it is worth, quote unquote, the time that I spent. It's just one of those things where it's why you run a raid 8,000 times.
Yeah, I call it a very complex version of Stockholm Syndrome.
Oh, it is 100%. But MLB is just, for me, it's just a game where it's like, I'm going to throw, like last night after we hopped off, I don't think it was with you, but after we hopped off Helldivers, most times after we hop off Helldivers, I'll just play, fuck it, I'm going to play 2 games of MLB, and that's 20. So it's one of those games that wastes a lot of my time. But there is that sense,
which is good. I mean,
it's good. I love it.
Games.
Look, I'm a baseball guy. It's great. And like the difference for me between Destiny and MLB, right? As someone who has played hundreds of hours of both, I'm going for a different player. I'm going for this slightly different number so that I can get the god roll on the Galahorns 2 Revenge of the Horn. Like I'm not looking for like, oh, this perk, if the gun you just got is really good, you should put that in your vault. But if you get this perk instead, you get a 1% increase on the reload, and those bullets have a 1% damage increase because like I don't want to do that, because that means nothing to me. I still use the fucking Graviton Lance in everything. That's like PS4 Destiny. I don't give a fuck about like the Doodle Dick SMG that does 0.2 more damage than the one I've had in my vault since 2021. Like that's, so the difference for me is like, oh, I'm going for Alfonso Soriano. I really want this Rafael Palmeiro card. So the motivation for me is like, I want these players. There's a Pedro Martinez card. I will do a lot for that card. Not pay for it. Haven't paid for that game yet, other than the $100 on the drop. So MLB is a weird game.
We'll talk a little bit more about, and I just think it's clear to say, like, what you're really getting at is that we all value things in a very weird and different way, and it doesn't make one better or worse than the other. It's just, they are quite different. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Destiny 2 news.
Yes.
Because I think it's going to rear its head again. I'm going to go ahead and throw out my other game, which I beat and platinumed today, which was Resistance Retribution.
I knew it. When I was writing the doc, so little background, I write the news, so take it off Brett's plate because he edits. I write the news and I put what I've been playing in there, and sometimes I'll know what he's been playing and I'll put it in there. So this time I put Brett, Resistance Retribution, and I almost put in parentheses platinum, but I'm like, I'll just let him do that because I knew you were gonna have it.
I got the platinum earlier before we recorded, and I haven't even posted it anywhere yet because I've been busy. I platinumed the game, and then I turned the TV off and started focusing on other crap I needed to catch up on. But yeah, I love that game. It still has problems. I mean, it's a PSP game. It's old and all those things. I think that Ben did good work on it, and I appreciate it. But having replayed the Siphon Filter games and then I applaud them for trying so hard to break their own formula, and I think that they did in a lot of ways. They pushed themselves really hard. They tried leaning into the mythos and the way that a Resistance game is created. They wanted to make sure the weapon wheel was important and in the game. They wanted to make sure all these different aspects we touched on. They wanted to leave their mark on it by introducing new enemies and new weapons, and all that's great, and I love that. And I think that there's a heart to this game that gives a charm that is stronger than what you get from like the Vita entry Burning Skies. But Burning Skies is how do I say this? Retribution is more of trying to leave its own mark and do something unique and interesting in it. That it's the only third-person shooter game in the series. It's the only one with a lot of the things that it chooses to do in the series. But then you get to a game like Burning Skies, which its whole marketing shtick is just trying to be, look how much this can be like the Resistance you knew from PS3 on the go. And it does a better job of, in pockets and blast, feeling like Resistance on the go more so than Retribution. But Retribution feels more like a real Resistance story than Burning Skies ever does, because Burning Skies kind of feels hollow. Its only goal is to convince you that it's Resistance on the go. So basically it's the whole, well, we have Resistance at home, and it's Resistance at home. And it does a pretty good job of making you be like, yeah, I guess this is Resistance. But Retribution, through all of its some flaws, does make you be like, they gave a shit and they really tried on a time and on a console that wasn't very easy to do that on. It has a problem that some games from that era have, to where the end is just gauntlet after fucking gauntlet after fucking gauntlet. And it just feels like they're throwing enemies at you because they don't quite know what else to do. But they kind of are like, we got to make this level a little longer, otherwise you might be mad. And, so it was a little frustrating. It was never bad enough that I wanted to quit playing it or anything. It was just kind of like, what was weird is I replayed this on Vita in 2020, and I didn't feel that way in Vita, but I did on PlayStation 5. So I wonder how much of that comes down to it being in the palm of my hands or what, because the game did seem to control a little differently, because it activates Resistance Plus mode, which was back on the PlayStation 3. If you had Resistance 3, like I'd mentioned before, you could play the game on your PSP screen with a DualShock 3, which was sick back in the day. But the game inherently controls differently because it was built to work on one analog nub and face buttons to aim. And that's just not what it is now. So when they take away, that game was really specific in that the Siphon Filter games never did this, but for specifically Resistance Retribution, they decided to make it to where there was a reticule, and then there was a box around the reticle. And as long as the reticule was in a group of enemies, it would snap the actual reticule within this box to go to the enemy. That way it can make up for how clumsy aiming with face buttons was. But whenever you're using this game, and as soon as it starts, it puts it in Resistance Plus mode. What's cool about that is this is one of the few PSP classics where you don't have to go in and tell the game to emulate the face buttons on your right analog stick, because the game already knows to use the right analog stick. But the game was inherently designed around aiming that was supposed to be forgiving. And when you're playing it this way, it is not fucking forgiving at all. Because it's like, well, no, you have a right analog stick, suck it up, buttercup. You're going to get those shots ace perfect. But that's not how the game was made or balanced for. So it was a little weird, but I still love that game. I really, really want the Resistance trilogy, 1, 2, and 3, to come out somehow, some way in a playable form that is not. I don't even think those games are on fucking PS Plus Premium.
3
unfortunately,
is 1 and 2.
I love those games, but that sucks because 2 is an incredible game and 1 is an incredible game, but 2 and 3 they hold special places in my heart. They're fucking crazy and they're very different. 2 took a lot of. Have you ever played any of the Resistance games besides Burning Skies?
Yeah.
You played them all?
2 and a little bit of 3.
So you kind of know from what you played of that 2 foregoes the weapon wheel and kind of goes the Call of Duty route where you're only ever able to hold 2 guns at one time. But I think that even though that came as a result from listening to feedback too strongly, I still think that they did a really good job with what they gave you with that design. And I think 2 is a really epic game in a lot of moments in spite of that. And 3 just takes everything that 2 did well and then puts it into a bow of a story that's far more The Last of Us than it is a military shooter. In terms of trying to have an emotional core that's not just bound to being a military man. It's instead like, well, you're a family man. What does family mean to you? What does the world mean to you? And it brings back all the Resistance staples that everyone loved, like weapon wheels and, the way that health worked. It was way differently, and co-op coming back. And 3 is a special game, dude. If you've never beat 3 is a fucking... Oh, it's incredible. It is so good. It is one of my all-time favorite games. So I would love to play those and be able to platinum them. That would be incredible, but I don't hold my breath for that, unfortunately. So
it'll happen.
We talking PS5 or are we talking PS7?
Well, Jim Ryan's not there, so there's no who would want to ever play this anymore. So maybe next
Don't tell me that about PS3 games because I'm having a blast playing these fucking PSP games.
Hey, don't talk to me like I'm not the PS3 guy.
I know you are.
In case anyone, right? Look at that. All of them.
Yeah, it's funny because I got through with Resistance Retribution, and right before I put the controller down, the one thing I did do was go to PS Premium so I could finally download and try to play the Lost Jack and Daxter Lost Legacy, or whatever it's called, Lost Frontier. There we are. Since I never beat it on PSP, I want to try that out. And I went to yours and downloaded a other game that we'll talk about from one of the questions. And then I set my controller down. So I'm going to play some more old games. Why not? I almost did.
Yeah, you need to do it pretty soon. It's so good.
With that in mind, though, before we head off into the news, I'm going to go ahead and tell you I've been too busy. Stuff going on. Work was kind of crazy. I can't get into all of it, but we had server issues on and off today. There was a water leak in our server room, which ruined some of our servers. It was really a fun day at work.
Sounds like it.
So it's pretty hectic, and I did not have a time to do community stake. I apologize. The reality is I do this show because I enjoy it, but I do this show while making sure that my actual main life is still a priority. So hope that you can forgive me for that. With that in mind, fuck you, bro.
Go fuck yourself.
With that in mind, I did manage to get the question collection call out, and this seems like a good time to go ahead and hop into, since it's Chris and I talking about all these things. If you're newer to the show, you probably don't remember or know of Mr. Saul Bridges. But if you have been listening a long time, like a lot of you have, Kiki or Maru has hit to Twitter over at Triangle SQRD. And he has said, when is Saul returning, and when do you think more Kingdom Hearts 4 info will be released, since today marks 2 years since the reveal trailer of 4? I would love to have Saul soon. And to mirror behind that, we already brought up old sweet Gran Turismo Jones. It's currently it's sweet Arisen Jones. If you notice, he always seems to what he's playing. And he says, I just like a Saul update in general. How's the lad doing? Saul's doing well. I still see Saul every single week, multiple times a week. Saul's still one of my great friends, and that's awesome. Saul is looking at buying a house with his wife. He is still, has a lot of his interests going on, still has some of the stuff that originally pulled him away from the show going on. He's still not opposed to coming back in and trying to find a way to be on the show. I will see if I can set him up to maybe come on and be part of episode 350, which is coming up. And if we can pull that off, then I will love to do that. But as just a quick update on Saul's still doing well. He hops in when he feels like he can, but Saul made a decision to be able to be a little bit more present in his life, because the reality of doing a podcast is that it's time consuming, takes a lot of effort. And when you have other things that you have to juggle, sometimes something has to, drop in order to keep this going. And he did not want to drop certain aspects in order to keep being able to do this. So he chose to step away, which is fair. And I wish him well. And I'm glad he's happy with his decision and been doing well. I think Chris can speak to the fact that doing a podcast is a fun idea on paper and it's fun in practice, but there are sacrifices and time commitments that do become complicated.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like I was talking with Sadie. If you don't know, that's my girlfriend's name. And I was having a conversation with her, and I'm like, dude, sometimes I wish that my job would just let me out in time to do this show rather than give me the day off, because then it's just a day off that I don't actually have,
Yeah.
Like my girlfriend's a teacher. So we do this show at 7:00. She gets out of work at 3:00. She's not going to come over here for 4 hours. She lives almost an hour away. So, I get it completely. It's a day that I know I will not see Sadie, at least until the summer. So
yeah.
I totally get it.
That's the complicated part of it. So, I mean, we're lucky in that every time that we have something come up and that we need to pause, or we can't be here, or if you can't be here, we've been lucky enough to have people that will fill in for you, if something came up. And I'm sure the same for me if I really needed to and we had to make it work last minute. But we have great listeners who are very kind and are willing to give us grace and say, hey, take a break. We'll still be here next week. And that's awesome. We appreciate it.
And look, so this is a commitment I will give to you, because I've said it to Brett. If this ever does become a full-time job, he won't be missing shows. Neither of us will. It'll be way more of a commitment, or it'll be like, hey, I'm taking a vacation in 2 months. Like, get ready, but like right now it's like, hey, we've got shit going on. This is our full-time job. It'd be like, dude, I'm going to my brother's house and I'll record the show there. But that's why I appreciate the audience right now, where it's like, listen, you guys understand we have lives, and so do you. So we appreciate that. And we do come together every week and do the show when we can. And sometimes even when we can't. Mr. Needles in the throat last week. You guys understand. So
that was rough.
It was.
Next day, I was kind of like, I don't think I should have done this, but I did it. So it was okay. So yeah, Saul's doing well. Hopefully we'll have him on soon. I hope that acts as a good update for everybody. But to the second part of it, when do you think we'll see some Kingdom Hearts 4? Now, Chris, I know that you're different. You've explored, you've experimented with KH this year. Though I know that you're not actively doing that. You've decided to replace that with a burning desire for Final Fantasy VII content.
You certainly.
First question I have for you is: has your flirtation with Kingdom Hearts has it changed any of your opinion on being excited about the future of the series, or do you still feel pretty disconnected?
Yeah, I don't care. I'm playing it because there are fans in the audience, or I wanted to play because you're a fan. There's fans in the audience, but right now I don't care. But I will say, when I do beat Kingdom Hearts, Brett will be playing Persona 5. Like, I've done fair. It. I played Birth by Sleep 2. I understand what happened on the 358/2 day. So you're gonna have to play Persona 5 now.
The 358 divided by 2 day.
Yeah. And you guys will know, because I'll come on the show and be like, oh, woo, hi guys, it's Triangle Squared.
I'll come in after playing Persona 5 and be like, Nani?
You just Persona every time you have to say
ripping my clothes off and just having sparkles and
exactly.
You're like, all right, let's go. Yeah. Look, I think that the games industry has continued to be in this weird problem. And actually, this is something that came up where there was an article where it was like Sony is going to aim to announce games 1 to 2 years before they come out now, I guess, to try and help keep expectations in check. Because, they kind of got into a weird point where they were announcing games and then it'd be about 3 or 4 years before they get out sometimes. And they ran into that early PS4 days. But it's funny because it's like that's a really hard promise to keep because you can announce a game thinking you're on schedule and then suddenly the game needs to push and suddenly it's been 3 years since you announced it, but it's not the right time for the game to come out. And what do? But in this, I kind of wish that they would stop doing this thing where they're like, well, it's a Kingdom Hearts concert. We've got to show something. So let's just show a fucking trailer for Kingdom Hearts 4. Was it cool? Of course it was. Was it nice to see a super weird, way different version of how Sora and company could look, how the world they're inhabiting can look, how you can skew it to have a much more realistic viewpoint? Yeah. Is it exciting to think about Kingdom Hearts being maybe a little less Disney connected? Sure. We don't know if that's actually what that means, but... you have all this.
It's going to be an MCU game. That's why it's fucking.
I'm so worried it's going to be like Sora's Palpatine's grandson. Fucking.
You know what would make it all worth it if they got Oscar Isaac in just to record somehow Sora survived.
That'd be pretty good actually.
Somehow Donald, Goofy, and Sora are here.
But
yep.
I think we need to see something this year. And there's a question that we have that I'll get a little further into this. But I'm really hoping this is something we see this year, even if it's as late as the Game Awards. We should be getting closer to this game being somewhere. And I think since Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is Nomura's other project he's been working on alongside this, is gotten to come out, I think he can kind of start to shift his focus back over to this for a little while. But since there's also a third Final Fantasy VII remake part, it's kind of like, where does that fit in? And Nomura's directed multiple games before, but it seldom works well. That's not a very good way to try and pull people across things. So we'll see, hopefully this year. But now we're going to go ahead and break over into the news. And the first piece of news is quick and fast and beautiful, and that is that Stellar Blade has gone gold. That game, I still very much enjoyed the demo. I think it did a great job. I went back and beat it finally. I think TT Dog, one of our listeners and patrons, had mentioned that when he played it, he felt like it was too restrictive in exploration, which I can understand. But I also think it's a demo of the demo is the first section of the game. And I think the first section of the game is trying to have you a little more on rails to make sure that you understand the gameplay mechanics. But, and I think it'll open up later in the game. And I think once you beat the demo and it shows you a series of really fucking cool cutscenes and gameplay and things that you can do in the game, it looks like it's going to expand a lot. But to TD Dog's point, the problem that you run into is a demo is supposed to sell you on a game. And so if exploration is a very big aspect of gaming that you enjoy, this demo fails to deliver on that in any way that's not just, hey, get a little bit off the beaten path and you'll find a few things. If you want wider exploration like Nier Automata may be offered, you're not going to find that in this demo. And it's reasonable to extrapolate from that you may not find it in this game and choose to skip it. So that's quite interesting. But oh, wow.
Looking forward to it. I'm not going to play the demo at this point, so
I don't blame you. I almost didn't because, I seldom play demos.
Mm-hmm.
But I had just such a morbid curiosity about this game because I'm like, it could so easily suck because of how much it clearly wants to be inspired by Nier Automata, and it's being made from a phone developer. So it's just like,
Yeah.
I feel bad questioning them, but that's how it feels.
Well, it's a totally valid question. I don't blame you at all.
Yeah. On the flip side, and there's a conversation between these games that we'll get to in a second. Next piece of news, Star Wars Outlaws. A new trailer detailing the story of the game has been released, revealing that the game is coming to shelves on August 30th of this year. 3-day early access is available for people willing to pay a higher price for the game's deluxe and gold editions, as has become expectation. And I would also imagine, though I don't think they've clarified it yet, that this game will very likely do what all these other games have done and hit Ubisoft's premium game subscription day one and with 3-day early access, much like Prince of Persia and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora did. With that in mind, this game is being made by the same team that made Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, and I like that game. I liked it enough to platinum it. But that game was treated very oddly, and we've said that a lot, that game just seemingly almost got like shit out, and they were just like, whatever, whoever buys it.
It would seem like this is their main project.
And I find that wild because Star Wars does well, right? But statistically speaking, Avatar does fucking massive in terms of its other areas. It is insane how much money Avatar has brought in, and they just didn't seem to care. And I've always felt bad for Massive because it just feels like they kind of got the short end of the stick there. I'm glad that it doesn't seem to be impacting their other projects. That's good. There's a couple of conversations around this game. So, Chris, I decided to go back and watch what I never watched back in E3 of last year, the gameplay for this. And it's interesting because it's really ambitious in that it's aiming to do a lot of things. It's aiming to be Uncharted in space, like on space planets.
Yep.
It's aiming to have ship combat and where you can leave, you're flying around out of orbit and you're shooting things. It's trying to have open areas for you to explore, but also areas that feel tighter and feel more narrative driven like an Uncharted. It's trying to have its stealth moments. It's doing all the things that modern AAA does where kind of like I talked about with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where it's like every game is expected to have some element of stealth, regardless of how good it is in the game. And this game does seem to be trying to juggle all these better than something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did. And I'm a little curious if that's going to come back to bite it in the ass, because sometimes a game doing a lot of stuff is cool. And sometimes a game doing a lot of stuff feels like you could have done less stuff better and I'd have been happier. Do you kind of have, I don't know if you watched the gameplay for this, but do you kind of have a sweet spot where you feel like you want games to be, or would you rather games be more ambitious and just try as many things as they can throw at?
Look, I think the problem with ambition is that if you don't execute, it's not going to go well for you. I think one of the things with this game for me, and not even to be that guy, but this looks like the game I wish Starfield was, And I think it's a prime example of what you were saying, where it's like, hey, it's really cool that you put 9,000 planets in this game, but how about you put 100 good ones in? And that's kind of the whole thing. So I hope they execute on this. I think I would be about 100 times more interested if it wasn't Star Wars, but I'm sure it'll be fun either way.
Yeah. It's funny because it definitely seems like, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case. Do you remember that 2012, 13, whatever, Star Wars 1313 that was like supposed to be Uncharted Star Wars? And it's cool because like Star Wars games have been so driven recently toward the lightsaber aspect of things that it's kind of nice to see a game where it's just about a normal outlaw in this otherwise crazy world.
I'm not to talk about Star Wars because I could not give a shit less, but everything that doesn't have to do with the Skywalkers is cool as shit. Literally everything, like Andor is cool. Rogue One, second best Star Wars movie behind Empire. But everything else is drivel for children. And I don't even say that to be a dick. That is literally what it is. It's a children's movie. That's what George Lucas said. Don't yell at me. I don't understand how my generation was supposed to grow up with Space Congress, and that was supposed to be cool. But whatever. So this game looks awesome to me because outside of the very clear, we couldn't leave it alone. So it's in the trailer. Here's Jabba, and I'm pretty sure that's Han Solo in the Carbonite. How about you just leave him the fuck alone? That's what I hate about Star Wars, right? In a galaxy. Do you guys know how big a fucking galaxy is? Okay. We live in a galaxy and we haven't explored all of it. That's pretty big. Okay. And you're trying to tell me that the only family that matters is the fucking Skywalkers?
Yeah.
Are there no other families in Star Wars? The Palpatines,
well, this comes into this
who are
thing,
Skywalkers now?
Well, this comes into the thing I was talking about a while back about referencing for the sake of referencing. Yeah. And there's a very clear argument that Star Wars Outlaws having references to Han Solo and the Carbonite and having Jabba the Hutt and all these different things. They are part of Star Wars.
Right.
And you get it. And so like having those feels like if you've been a fan of this for a long time, here's something cool. But the reality of it is that every now and then it does kind of feel like, yeah, this is a galaxy. Why do you keep only focusing on the same like 12 sets of characters? And it's like, so if it takes place in the original trilogy, it's always in the original trilogy's timeline or around it or between the prequel trilogy and the original, you always have this indication of where you want to pull in a couple of characters. You always want to pull in a Yoda somehow if you can. You always want to try and pull in Jabba the Hutt if it's taking place. And if it's taking place in a different time period, like whenever you look at something that's a more driven towards like The Force Unleashed, it was a lot more like The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Or really Revenge of the Sith is really more of what that game was like. It was very modeled after that time period of Star Wars where it's very dark and very gritty, but it's also trying to be a little more political and trying to look at all these different things. And, you know, like you said, our version of Star Wars was fucking space politics, which I actually like. When the movie executes the space politics well, it can work. But a lot of the times it's, you know, that trilogy is fighting itself and trying to be cool. I still think Revenge of the Sith is my favorite Star Wars movie for a number of reasons. It has issues, but it's still very good.
Empire is one of the best movies of all time.
Empire is great. Empire is a fantastic movie.
You said great. I'm just joking. No, look,
but it's like, why can't we be outside of that? But the reality of it is that people like referencing because referencing has just become a cool thing to do. It's become an expectation. And people also want this thing to where they go, well, if I couldn't tell this with Star Wars before, I totally can now because look, there's Jabba the Hutt.
Well, but it can be graceful, right? Like, two examples for you, right? Rogue One, the ending
If
scene,
fucking Vader shows up in this game, I swear to fucking God.
He will. They couldn't even leave it alone in another game. So it's like, guys.
Fucking...
But that's what I don't understand. Like Rogue One, the last scene of Rogue One is one of the fucking coolest scenes.
Oh, it is.
In movies.
I'll give you that. And that is Vader all over again.
It is. It's him. But it's like they did it well. But, you know, it's just, I don't know.
Well, and here's the other thing.
If Helldivers
the movie
works
over, without that scene. That's actually what makes Rogue One work, is that you can take that scene out. That scene is cool, but it works without that scene. So that scene is just icing on the cake.
Yes, but I think it's
at the end.
Well, but yes, exactly. But that's kind of the same thing I was going to say, right? Is where if Helldivers crossed over with Killzone, that's cool, right? Throw me on a planet, be like the Helghans are coming and they've joined with the automatons or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you put fucking Rico in my ship, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
If I jump up to the Princess of Destruction and Rico is shooting into the walls because his AI sucks, I'm going to be mad. And be like, this isn't cool. But if we're just going to Helgen, I'm like, this is dope. You know? That's what I want to see from references.
Yeah, it can be done right. Another conversation that's been happening around online of this is a little bit I've been able to see online today. The conversation around beauty in gaming has popped back up, right?
Oh,
this beauty for women in gaming. And it's interesting because I think Stellar Blade is a very big example of a game that said, hey, we just want a good-looking protagonist. It's a robot. Clearly, a robot would be designed specifically, and why would, you would design it to be elegant. And it's like, why would... So you look at that and you're like, okay, this is clearly leaning into the ability for characters to look, unrealistic. And all by all really counts. But then you have something like Star Wars Outlaws, and I see people kind of hitting that with like, this is the main character, she's ugly. And I was kind of wanting to see what your take on that was, because not that we have to dig into this kind of trite and weird conversation. Look, I agree.
How do you feel about DEI, Brett?
Should it matter? Should it matter if a character is pretty or not? Probably not, but at the same time, it doesn't matter if a character is pretty in the opposite way. Like if there's nothing wrong with being pretty, just like there's nothing wrong with your character being ugly. It's fine. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point,
thing, right? Colin has said it a couple of times because he did a whole thing on this topic, and one of the things he said, which is true, is like ugly people exist too.
That is their representation.
I'm gonna break it to 99% of this audience. You look more like the chick from Fable than the chick from Stellar Blade.
That's fair.
That's just the reality. The chick from Stellar Blade is 1% of people, right? Margot Robbie is famous because she looks like Margot Robbie, and she's a great actress.
Yeah.
Okay, if I had Margot Robbie's skills,
she'd be famous even if she wasn't a good actress. To be honest,
Wolf of Wall Street would be a different movie, but me in Margot Robbie's place, different. Okay, then that's kind of the thing here. Like, look, I play all of my games as female protagonists, and I make all of my female protagonists hot. Right? That's just how I play games. But I've also played games where I made my protagonist ugly as sin. It doesn't really matter. But I will maintain the argument that if I'm going to spend 100 hours with a character, I would want to enjoy looking at them. Like Baldur's Gate is a worse game to me if I had made my protagonist ugly. It's a funnier game, but it's not as good, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the thing about Baldur's Gate 3, though. Even the characters that are meant to be a little less conventionally attractive are still oddly fuckable. Yeah. Like all the characters in the game, you're like, I mean, okay.
Well, and that's the thing.
And considering that you quite literally can fuck them all, that was the goal.
Right, but I don't know. Without sounding like a pig, like the chick from Fable's fuckable. I don't know what to tell you. Like all of these, like I think the who cares?
Well, look,
if the character's hot, the character's hot.
What I thought,
the character's ugly.
What I thought was really interesting about Outlaws is that I don't see it. No, I don't think the character's hot because I don't find that time period to be as attractive depending on what era of the 80s. Because like a good example is I watched Hot Tub Time Machine last night. I love that movie. It's fucking stupid as shit. But whenever they go back in time, they have like the colorful spandex. It's like really body fitting and the fluffy, like the puffy hair. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of still find that attractive. Like I look at, and I wasn't even born in the 80s, but like I see that. I'm like, there's attractive elements of that. Yeah. But what I think Outlaws does really well is something that the original Star Wars movies did, in that a lot of the people are kind of like that 80s punk kind of off the cuff. Like she looks, that character, she looks fine. Her face looks fine. Like it looks like an average person's face. And the rest of her looks like they nailed the aesthetic that the original Star Wars trilogy brought of being like this late 70s, early 80s kind of off the cuff style. And I think it looks perfect. And it looks more perfect than any other Star Wars game that they've put out recently, where I'm like, damn, this looks more like Star Wars for the majority. Well, that sounds bad to say. This looks more like Star Wars for a longer period of time than the modern Star Wars that's starting to make everything look a little bit more like fucking Tron Legacy. Great movie. I love Tron Legacy. But,
yeah,
they're kind of running the risk of falling into everything just having a blue or red glow.
I just think both sides of the argument are really weird. Like, it's really weird to get.
Look, both of them are weird bones to pick. That's my real thing. For people who are like, it's unfair that video games people are attractive. They're not real. Why does it matter?
Right.
They are not real. That's it. They're not real.
It's like you look at like soap operas or sitcom. Not sitcoms isn't the right word, but like Vampire Diaries is a great example because the ugly people in that show are 10s.
Yeah, the people who are supposed to be the outcast.
But yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we're watching like Mean Girls. The hottest girl is the one who everyone's like, "Oh, you suck and you're weird." Like the goth chick. I don't remember her name. I haven't seen that movie at all.
The one from Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hell, there you go. So
yeah,
I don't know. I just don't get it. Like, I think a lot of our media, that's the thing, is a lot of media, unless it's pointedly the opposite way, right? With all due respect, Precious, that's going to take a certain star, okay, to make that movie. But a lot of the movies that we watch and the stuff that we want to see is idealized versions of reality, okay?
Yeah.
People who look like the cops from Brooklyn Nine-Nine aren't cops.
Yeah, we had that conversation at work today. Actually, we were kind of talking about Brooklyn Nine-Nine and how the last season kind of got very odd and how it decided to be pointed towards real world things when the rest of the show had never done that. Right. And I was like, the weird thing about it is that they tried suddenly anchoring this show in reality. And that was a weird call because the whole point of this show is that that a police department would never actually run this way. Like, that's kind of the whole point of it. It's fucking stupid. It's over the top. It's ridiculous. It's meant to be a break from reality while touching on things that we do find familiar. But you don't look at this show and go, well, why isn't this show talking about COVID and police brutality and all these things? Instead, you're just kind of like, the whole point of this is to watch people who are cops be cops in a way that no one expects real cops to be cops.
Right. It was like I was reading Twitter.
You know how pissed you would be if you found out the entire fucking police department was doing a heist and then your fucking mom got murdered in the middle of their heist and you're like, y'all could have been doing fucking anything else.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, it's funny because that reminds me of this story, right? Where it was this woman who saw a Facebook post from her nurse, right? And the nurse was saying like, really good job to my fellow nurses. Like, we used dark humor to get through the day. Like, it was a really hard day. And this person on Twitter was like, my grandfather died someone died that day in that hospital and I don't feel great. But it's like, they're not in the same positions as you. So like they're working. So I understand as a manager being like, hey, good job, guys. Like, you really busted your ass and got through the night. But I also understand you as a patient being like, you used dark humor while my grandfather was dying. Like, I understand both arguments. And I think that's kind of the same thing here where it's like, guys, like, we're all in separate worlds. That's why even talking about the whispers, what we were talking about before, it's like people will argue that point because their opinion is the right opinion. That's one thing I hate about talking on the internet. Talking about the internet is ridiculous because to me, my opinion is right.
Yeah.
And it's something that we deal with in what we're working on the side, where it's like, I don't give a shit what you say. I'm telling you that I don't think this works because in my head it does not. You know what I mean?
That's the weird thing about all this, right? Is like, from a creator standpoint, that's way different, right? It's the flip side of what you're talking about. But from a creator standpoint, it's about being able to try and set your opinion aside so that you can see it as best you can from another point of view. And that's why I've been so adamant on what we're working on and being like, let's see what other people say. Let's actually look and get input from people who have less stake in this, because they're probably going to give more reasonable advice that we can, creativity wise, it's a mix between wanting your thing to be enjoyable by people and to fix things they may not find enjoyable, while still making sure that you feature the parts of it that you wanted to feature that made you want to make it to begin with. Right. It's a balance between those two things. And even if the thing you really wanted it to be is sometimes not the best focus tested, you're still just like, fuck it, I'll work on making it more fun for the majority of people, but I still want this part in it because that's what it was supposed to be. And it's a constant balance.
I can't imagine creating in a day like today, because I'm creating in a day like today. And I've talked to you a couple times where I'm like, do you think I would get in trouble for this? Of something I want to write, where I'm like, I want to write this. I think this is a cool idea. And then I'm like, but would I get in trouble? Like, I had this whole thing where one of the main characters in my book we talked about it, was trans, and it had nothing to do with the fact they were trans. I just thought it was interesting, like an interesting wrinkle on it. And but then I was talking about it. I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do this because I don't want to have to like dance on eggshells, which is worse. It sucks that you can't have that stuff,
and it's this other thing where there's like this idea that that representation should be there, but then people start representing and doing things, and then people start saying, well, no, hold on, you can't write about trans people because you're not trans. It's like, well, which one do you want? Do you want me to think about these things and include them in my stories in ways? Or do you want me to never talk about it because I'm not trans? And the problem I have with both of them, right, is one is like, well, we want these people to be in there, and they go, okay, I'm gonna work it out. And then like, well, this actor really nailed this part, and we're gonna give it to him, and it's for a disabled person, but this guy is an able-bodied person, but he really nailed the character and what we wanted to see from him. And then you start going, well, you should have given that to a disabled actor. And you go, I mean, yeah, that'd be nice, but maybe the disabled actors didn't nail the part the way I wanted, and that's all it comes down to. And it's like, why in an ideal world is it cool? Sure, but it's like sometimes I feel like you do it just to throw it away because like the Avatar: The Last Airbender is coming back around with the original creators doing new animated things, and they're doing something that's in the future of the original story's timeline where it's going to have Aang, Katara, and all the different people, and apparently they're not bringing any of the original voice cast back. Like some of them make sense. Aang is a kid in the original show. He's going to be an adult here. He's not going to have the same voice. But like a lot of these people can have the same voice and they're just not going to because they've decided, a nice thing to do, to have it where they want all their characters to match the race of the people that they are. But my thing about that is like Avatar is already fictional. These aren't real people. These aren't real races. These are just made up people. These are this idea of this group of people is based off of Asian people, but there's also obviously people who are based off of more traditionally white people in the show. And it's just kind of like, yeah, it's cool, and I don't really care that you're doing it, but why does it matter that you bring the voice actors back from the originals that make sense to bring back? Yeah. And because of this. I don't think anyone's going to yell at you because you were like, yeah, but Sokka's already been made. He's a character everyone knows, and they know what he sounds like, and there's no reason we shouldn't use him again.
Well, to get off of this before we have to call fucking David Jaffe and Colin Moriarty to mediate this debate, I think I just... as a creator, as someone who wants to be a creator in terms of more fiction stuff, right? I would, if I wrote my book and it was successful, I hope that if a trans person plays the part of my lead character who is canonically female, they're the best person for the role. I hope that the person I wrote is black. If a white man was the best person for the role, they would race swap. Just like I would hope that the white characters that I write, if the best person for the part is a black man or a Hispanic man or a trans deer elf, whatever they want to be, as long as they're the right person for the role, whatever. So tying it all back to video games, if Eve is hot and it works out in the game, great. If the Fable lady is not hot and it works out in the game, great. The reality is all that's going to happen is I'm going to look at Eve's character once and be like, her butt jiggles. And then the boss fights are going to be really hard because apparently this is a Sekiro game. So yeah, we're talking about, that's the thing that really is shitty about this fucking Stellar Blade thing, is there is legitimate boss gameplay that I could be watching, and instead all I'm seeing is Eve in the naked suit, which, by the way, the fact that the naked suit makes the game harder is an incredible troll. But yeah, that is all I'm seeing is her ass and her jiggling around, and that is doing just as much a disservice as the other side. Because if you want to make the argument that Eve being hot makes the game good, you can make that argument. But how about you just show me that the game is good and Eve is hot?
Yeah.
I don't
have
understand.
Your cake and eat it too.
Right. Like the chick from Heavenly Sword is hot, but nobody talks about the fact that she's hot. Talk about the fact that Heavenly Sword is awesome.
Yeah, Heavenly Sword is a fucking sick game. I don't know if you've ever played it. I hope you have. Narco, first of all, Narco is hot. Second of all, the game kicks ass. The game is really good. Yeah.
It's the same thing with Tomb Raider, right? Lara Croft, triangle titties and all, sex symbol.
Yeah,
but the game's
also
good.
Sick games.
Exactly.
Yeah, dude, I'm in a fucking cave shooting a T-Rex. Let's go.
Yeah.
I have just discovered the first of what we consider to be a multi-million year extinct creature, and my first instinct is to shoot it. I remember as a kid, we were talking about dinosaurs being extinct, and then I go home and I'm playing Tomb Raider. I'm like, I'm killing this fucking thing I thought to be extinct.
Look, just
like,
make
there's no Jurassic
games.
Park here. It's like, fuck it, I'm killing this bitch right here, right now.
The thing is, as long as you tell your stories well, it doesn't matter. Okay, Francis Ford Coppola could direct a porno. If the story's good, people are going to watch it.
Yeah.
If Quentin Tarantino made a porno, not only would it be the biggest movie in theaters, it would be a classic because it's Tarantino. It would be artful Sasha Grey porn. But like, it doesn't, and that's all I'm trying to say, right? Is it doesn't matter what the content is, as long as it's good. So make the content good. And then if you want your protagonist to be hot, make your protagonist hot. Who gives a shit? But that's not what's important. This is just a very superficial argument.
I think going back to your thing, though, and then kind of closing the book on this, you're talking about those things that you're like, should I do this or will I get in trouble? I think that the thing a lot of people get caught up on is I don't like that. I don't like the thought process that someone just trying to write something that they are actually think is creatively interesting, but being worried that just by brushing up against the subject, you're going to get in trouble. That's the part of it that makes it makes it uncomfortable in the fact that it's like, what's wrong with just wanting to tell a bit of fiction and explore things that you don't really know. We've done that as a group of people for hundreds of years. I mean, I don't think that fucking Shakespeare had to actually live out the Macbeth events in his life to be able to write about Macbeth. He was just coming up with. I don't think Edgar Allan Poe was like, bro, I killed a guy and I hit his body and it was eating me alive, so then I wrote this story. I don't think that's how that happened. It's like the whole point is it's being exaggerated of things that you don't already do or interact with. But where I'm going with that is I think a lot of people get hung up on the fact that it gets complicated sometimes, whether it should or shouldn't, or whether it's even reasonable. But it's unfortunate to sometimes feel like, did this only happen or not happen because the people were scared of the response? And anytime that you feel like something was altered only because of a fear of response, it feels like we might have missed out on great writing or great music or great art because someone was too afraid to just create the thing that was in their head. That sucks. Like that's the thing where a lot of people get caught up on that. It's like, Chris, the story that you were talking about writing with this character, I thought was interesting. And I thought the way that you were talking about using them was interesting. And the way they tie into this other project that we're working on works and is interesting. And I was like, it's a shame if you don't do it because you're worried. So, my advice to anyone creating is just make what you want to make, and just to be like, to hell with anyone who tries to tell you what your intent was. Because I'm a very intent-driven person, and if you meant something bad when you were creating it, then fine, they can call you out. But no one can ever tell you that when you were creating something that you intended to do something bad and hurtful with someone. That's just not the reality, You'll know what you were doing when you wrote it. Yeah. If you can be true to yourself, the people who have problems with it, because it kind of goes back to the Final Fantasy VII thing. Someone will always have a problem with whatever way you decide to go. So why not just go the way you want to go and deal with the people who are, at least be proud of the fact that they're, because wouldn't you kind of feel shitty if you changed something and then people were still bitching and you're like, I changed the shit and I still didn't win? Why not be like, well, at least I didn't fucking, compromise on my vision. I think that's the thing about all of this.
We're talking about people who, I saw a tweet the other day that was like talking about Evan Peters' school shooter character from American History, or you know what I'm talking about, American Horror Story. Yeah. And there was like, oh, y'all really romanticized a school shooter. And I'm like, no, they romanticized the character they got to know. That's the thing, right? There is a cut of Final Fantasy VII where Shinra's the good guys. And it's not that hard to imagine, because on its face, you are playing the villains. On its face. But because of the perspective we're given, we're not.
You're the good guy terrorist.
But you are literally terrorists. Yeah. That game starts with a terrorist attack worse than 9/11.
Well, see, Chris, this is why the story of both Nier and Nier Automata are so interesting to me, because the whole purpose of both those games, though I think a little bit more in the first one, is that you always view, the player in any given story, always view the story in the perspective that you're given as being the good guys. And the whole point of those stories is through multiple playthroughs and seeing multiple perspectives, you start to realize that the very firm view that you had that you were the good guy wasn't so right. And you weren't wrong that you thought you were the good guy, because from your perspective, you were. But from someone else's perspective, you were the villain in their story. And that's what makes storytelling so interesting.
Right. And that's what's great is, hey, listen, if the Friday the 13th movies started with like 30 minutes of Jason as a kid, everyone would be on Jason's side. You would watch those movies and be like, those camp counselors can go fuck themselves.
Well, what's funny is the movie kind of does that in a very different way, but it's like, hey, we're trying to make you sympathize with why this creature exists, why this thing exists, how he came to be. And they actually paint Jason in a pretty sympathetic light, even though he's doing horrendous shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brett, you want to know what else is horrendous? What EA is doing
EA
to
Motive.
EA Motive.
Yeah. So EA Motive, as you may know, the team behind Dead Space Remake, is being moved into EA's Battlefield initiative. They will work alongside DICE, Criterion, and Ripple Effect on the next game in the series. In the same announcement, they announced that the next season of Battlefield 2042 will be the game's last season. So Battlefield 2042 will not be an evergreen game of constant updates. I'm sure it'll be a game that's supported with a server for a long while, but they are preparing the game to end of support. 2042's lasted a lot longer than I thought it would have.
Yep.
That game launched to some pretty fucking rocky everything.
I didn't expect much when I found out that they were finally patching in the leaderboards, but the interesting story about 2042 is it could be good now, but I don't know if you remember. I think I was on the show when that game was coming out. I was very excited for it, and then it launched so badly, I never played it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but I also find this thing where all these companies continuously move developers that are doing great things elsewhere into making new things. They tried this once before, if you remember. They did this with Visceral before they shut Visceral down. So it's actually kind of funny that the Dead Space remake team is doing the same thing that the original Dead Space creator team did, where Visceral made fucking Battlefield Hardline, and that was their last game.
Yep. See, what I'm confused about is I could have sworn. Okay, I actually just continued reading. So they are still working on the Iron Man game. That was what I thought was weird. So did that not happen? But they are still making that, so that's cool. I don't know. I don't have a ton to say. I thought this was important to go in the news, but if they're still making Iron Man, maybe it's not that big a deal.
Well, the real question is how big are any of these teams? Because, I mean, the other hope is that for anybody like me, at least, is like Dead Space 2 is getting remade and given the same treatment that Dead Space 1 got. The question is, how big of a team do you even need to do that? Because you have game structure, but they made a lot of changes to game structure in Dead Space 1. Good calls, in my opinion. But it's a little more than just being like, well, you already know exactly what's happening. But it's not so much that you need a full team, as we know from looking at how small Bluepoint has remained over the years. Remaking a game is inherently a smaller effort than creating from the ground up. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes along. My real hope is that Motive doesn't end up getting shuttered as a result of being thrown onto Battlefield and making a game that's not in line with what people want from Battlefield, and then shuttering the studio that you forced to do it.
Yeah. Hey, maybe they'll go independent.
There's been a lot of that lately. That'd be kind of interesting. Next thing here is Destiny 2, as we talked about. So this is Chris's writing. Take it for what it's worth. Bungie has shed some light on how the final season of Destiny 2 is shaping up. They showed guns and stuff, a new class. I don't know. It's Destiny 2. Go play it. If you like Destiny 2, you probably watched the showcase by now. I don't like Destiny 2. I did not watch the showcase. I've been told the community is very happy. Here's a few texts from my friend Sean, someone who cares. Quote, they actually did it. They over-delivered. I responded with, fuck yeah, dude. Glad they saved the studio, maybe. And a crying, laughing emoji. He followed that up with, quote, never seen the community so positive. Even the jaded Destiny fanboys are saying it's a 10 out of 10, so they might have actually done it. The next text, quote, I figured they would need a new subclass to save it. Instead, they did that and the first new enemy faction in 5 years. So there you go. Have fun, Guardians. Look, I don't have a lot to say there, but kind of circling back into this idea of what we were talking about earlier is value judgments in games are really interesting because everyone values everything differently in all aspects of life. So it's really easy for us to kind of jokingly shit on Destiny 2 because we had a really weird relationship with it. Completely self-inflicted, by the way. We were trying to go for a platinum that we wanted in a game that we were getting very burned out on.
I was already burnt out on.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't really hate Destiny 2. I've played so much of it that it's impossible for me to say that, but I don't think I ever want to play Destiny 2 again. I keep saying that, but then there is a part of me that's like, this is the final expansion, and I kind of do want to see what they do with the story, but at what point can I just watch that and be like, that was cool?
Part of my problem is I don't give a shit less about the story.
Yeah.
And Sean would be trying to tell me, he's like, oh, it's Savathun's scale horn. I was like, dude, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care.
I'm with you. So we're going to move on to the next thing real quick. Because, I mean, we can realistically, we can talk about that a little bit more. And if it's worth getting into. But I think it's just important at the end of the day to note that every game's different. And like I'm glad Chris even brought up anything to do with the specific side of his love for MLB and how that is very easy to mirror against someone else's love for something like Destiny 2, because these games have a very broad reach and they serve different audiences at the same time, and that's kind of what their goal is. You know, there's a pretty small overlap, I'd imagine, of hardcore MLB players and hardcore Destiny players, but there is undoubtedly some.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but it's a Venn diagram that's probably lightly touching. So that's cool. Yeah, I mean, exactly. All these games get to serve different parts of the industry and kind of give different sections of the industry this type of monetization and evergreen games that I know a lot of people like, that, you know, they may not be my jam, but some people like being able to play a game for 10 years. I want to just play a system for like 6 to 10 years, depending on how good it goes. You know what I mean? That's all I want.
I do.
So
I want to play the same game in 6 different versions for one console cycle. That's what I want.
The next thing up, Helldivers 2 has a new Warbond coming in on April 11th. The Warbond will again feature guns, emotes, capes, and armor. So you know the drill. There are going to be new types of guns that change the way the game works. There'll be new type of armor that gives you different passives. So if you're still loving Destiny, if you're still loving Helldivers, then you can get a BR-14 Adjudicator rifle. That's one of them, is an Eruptor rifle. It says it's bolt action rifle, which is pretty cool. Jet assisted shells that explode shrapnel in all directions upon impact. That sounds pretty sick. There's an exploding crossbow, which is a cool addition to the game. Thermite grenades are coming. There's a grenade pistol instead of just a grenade launcher, which will be really great for blitz missions. That's a cool idea. There's a pilot booster, which is basically the booster lowers the time it takes for extraction shuttle to reach the extraction beacon, which is awesome because sometimes that 2 minutes matters a whole lot. There's a couple of more things, but you get the thing. These war bonds are about changing the way the game plays and how you interact with the game to keep it fresh and new. They continue to do a good job. I quite like the Quasar cannon. It's fucking sick.
It's a good gun. I saw a tweet. I think it was Paul Tassi, and had Arrowhead done this, it would have been the greatest shit ever. You know how we beat the automatons, and there was that moment of peace. he had just tweeted, they should just disappear. You guys won. It's over.
The whole game
is over. You guys won. Super Earth is saved. It's done. Bye.
What would be really interesting and ballsy would be to do that, go away for like a month.
Yeah. Well, Fortnite
and then
did
suddenly,
that. You remember that?
And then suddenly, yeah, I do remember that. But that would be pretty ballsy. Go away for a month where you can't play, and then suddenly have it. This would make it be so difficult to do, but have it to where it sends alerts to anyone they can tell has played Helldivers and be like, alert, all Helldivers on deck. New bug infestation is hit. Or even better, say that those two are at rest, right? And they've been talking about the Illuminate. Have it be where it's quiet for a month, and then it's all Helldivers on deck. The Illuminate are on board, and have it to where as people are starting to flood back to the game, the Illuminate are starting to bring back the bug population and fuck with somehow the way that bots are working, and it starts to be a multi-front war where all of the Illuminate is working with both of them simultaneously to try and advance their position. It'd be sick.
Dude, let you play it, but every time you land on a planet, there's just people working. So you can't actually do anything. I'm glad they didn't, because obviously I'd rather play the game than do the cool meme, but the cool meme would have been pretty cool.
That's the thing, man. Sometimes you got to be ballsy with your games to get the benefit, but they've been pretty ballsy with this one, and they've benefited quite a bit. So who can blame them for being like, yeah, let's just actually keep updating the game.
Exactly.
So all right. Next thing we have here, Sea of Thieves PS5 Details. So here are the important details of Rare's blog post in bullets. There are exclusive cosmetics for PlayStation. There is, of course, crossplay that you can expect to play between people on PC and Xbox. Some skins can only work if you're playing on PlayStation. There is a closed beta that will be available before launch. You will have to log into a Microsoft account, if I'm not mistaken, much like you do to have to do most of the online stuff for Minecraft. If I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. I only got to play for a day.
Yeah, before Blake. Yeah, I know. Before Blake. There are single player Cs so that you can play the game without having to worry about running into anyone else. Cosmetics will transfer with account. So Chris wrote on here that I don't have to fear losing my cool seasonal item. PS Plus and Game Pass will be required for online, just like it is on Xbox. So this will not be a game that falls under the free, because of course it is a paid game. Also, there are 250 trophies, but it's unclear right now whether the trophies are broke down by expansion, like a lot of games on PlayStation are, or if the entire trophy list is just 250 trophies.
No,
I really doubt it.
No, there's math to the main trophy list, which is why like you'll see like 100. If it only has bronzes, it's like 100 because it has to. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the back end point total has to reach 100. Bronze are a certain level, silvers are a certain level, and then platinums beyond that. So the 250 is definitely not the one list. So it's probably all the DLC that'll come with it. Like,
I think so as well.
Stuff and
my question is just, how reasonable will it be to platinum this game? Because I'm definitely down to try it. I love.
Doesn't matter how reasonable it is. We're gonna get the.
We're doing it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I was telling Sean,
you can't say no, Brett.
You're gonna get on Sea of Thieves? He's like, when it comes to PS Plus, and I'm like, PS Plus. The Microsoft, if Microsoft gives away Sea of Thieves on PlayStation, it is well and truly over. Like, the games being here is one thing, but when I see hey, it's April 2026, here's Sea of Thieves for free on PS Plus, that's all right, cool, it's over now. We can stop having that conversation.
We're going to try and get through the rest of this episode relatively quickly. So the last piece of news here is an interesting one, because we've had a lot of conversations on the show around this, and we've had a lot of talks with different people in the listenership. And so I'm sure we'll hear from some of them again here. But I think I'm glad Chris put it in here. I think it's worth putting in here and giving a little bit of a brief window too. So this show was, of course, debated the efficacy of launching new live service games into the market. And a recent industry report lends credence to that idea. Newzoo has reported that 60% of total game time in 2023 went to games that were 6 years or older. Those games include Grand Theft Auto 5, Fortnite, Apex Legends, Roblox, and Call of Duty. Which gets a little weird on Call of Duty, because I'm sure they're talking about Warzone, but Warzone 2 is technically a different game, technically launched and superseded. So it gets a little weird, but
The weird thing is it's now just a launcher called Call of Duty. So
you're right.
The thing had it on there. It was like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 / Warzone. So,
yeah. So, look, clearly everyone has different ideas about this. Everyone trusts that different developers and publishers who are looking into this have some kind of numbers that would lend credence to why it's a reasonable bet to try and break into this market. But I think that it's also reasonable to look at this and go, this does at least air out the fact that it's very hard to edge into this market at the very least, because this is... Okay, let me separate this. My opinion of this is that this is kind of a damning view of the gaming industry in general. Because I don't think that we should ever want an industry where the vast majority of playtime is happening with exclusively older games, because that doesn't paint a good picture for new games in general. But it is easier to get there when these games are being designed in a way to be played forever, which promote you playing them day in and day out. I'm surprised Destiny wasn't on this list, but Destiny did have a pretty rocky year.
It might have been. I can double check.
Yeah. But look, all of those different things goes to show you that this is, at least at the very, very least, a very difficult thing to try and break into when all of these games as a service have been around for quite some time, and they continue to be pillars of those marketplaces. So it doesn't mean that it's impossible for anyone to break in. Of course, arguably right now, Helldivers is doing that, but that's very difficult. And I will be very mindful to watch and see how Sony's new games do, if they can start to dethrone some of these. If we'll hit a day where Fortnite is no longer the king of service-based games, where we'll hit a day where Apex is no longer one of the biggest, battle royale style games. If we hit a day where Call of Duty loses its throne, these are all very crazy ideas that are hard to imagine. And I'm willing to let them happen. And I would even actually welcome it in some ways. I want new games to come in and take these off because it's better for the history, or it's better for the health of the industry as a whole, in my opinion. So, Chris, what's your take on this? I saw that you put this in here, which I think means that you had something in mind when you were looking at this and putting it in here.
First off, Destiny 2 was not there. But interestingly, more of the data is that 66 titles accounted for 80% of all playtime.
Shit, dude. Yeah.
But I actually do kind of differ from you in a way where I don't necessarily think it's an indication that something is wrong with newer games.
I don't think it's that. I don't want to say that so much as becoming entrenched in an old game does have the potential to stop people from even potentially trying out new games that might otherwise pull them.
Well, the reality is, though, I don't know that this is indicative of anything. It's indicative of a lot. But I think the biggest thing that it's indicative of is that it is almost impossible to break into the live service industry in the way that you have to imagine Jim Ryan was trying to position Sony to.
Yeah.
Okay. Something like Helldivers probably doesn't have the same amount of regular players as these big games. And at least they probably do now. But what happens in a year?
Yeah. Does that maintain? Yeah.
Because here's the thing. As much as we like Helldivers, I think Brett and I both said this, but we're done. Like, we need a break. And so I have to wonder how that affects the longevity of the game.
That's different for everyone, right? Like, I don't tend to play games that way. You are a little more, you have a bigger history of playing games that way. It's a little more surprising that you're done with it than the fact that I want to break for a bit. And I'll still play it here and there, but it's not going to be a day in, day out game like it was for, a month or two, which was awesome. That's good. I'm glad it had that. But that's how I am with almost anything. It's very rare that I play something for full 6 months, if not even a year. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Even when we did Destiny 2, I put like 100 hours in 2 months.
Yeah. It was done. But I think, to me, what this shows me is that this part of the industry is hard to break into, and people are stuck in the games that they're playing. I think it's that simple. So you have to do something really special to get those people away. It's the same argument we've made about digital libraries, right? Nobody's leaving the PlayStation 5, especially when you get up to the numbers like I have. And even like Brett has. I don't know how committed you are to your digital library, but it's still money that you spent. It's the same thing here. I'm less likely to play another battle royale than Apex because I've spent my money in Apex. I've spent a lot of my time in Apex. So I'm going to play that. I think that's the pocket for these games, is comfortable. Me and my friends play Apex. Me and my friends play Warzone. Me and my friends play Fortnite. I'm a FIFA guy.
Which I kind of think is the brilliance of sports games. Getting people like this, but being yearly releases where they continue to make at least a $60 purchase on top of all of the things. It's like a game like Apex and a game like Fortnite and a game like Roblox are all free to play, and they make a ton of money off people spending money on other things. But it's also pretty amazing when you can have people spending a ton of money on your extra microtransactions while also every year giving you $60 so they can get the newer version of the comfort game. And that's why we talked about they don't change drastically, because you don't really want them to. You want to fall back into them and go, this is a slightly better version of what I played before that I already knew I loved. Let me just keep going through that cycle.
We talked about that when MLB came out, where we were joking about the reviews, and I was like, talking about how people who reviewed the game were like, oh, there's not that many differences from last year. But the people who play the game are like, don't fucking change anything. Like, I don't want to see a thing change. I know how to hit with the PCI. I know how to use pinpoint pitching. Don't change that shit. All right. Don't change it so that IGN gives you a 9 instead of a 6 or a 7, because the 6 is the game I want. It's not the game that some guy who plays it for 10 hours to review it wants.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we'll see what that ends up. I'll be curious to see what 2024's looks like, and if any of the new games start to break in and the list looks a lot different. I think one of the things to note here too is that 2023 was a big year for single player games, which meant that you were jumping from single player game to single player game more, and that some of these other games got a chance for people who weren't jumping around to stay around because they were the bounce back go-to constant games. In a year where there's not as much single player and there is more competition coming up in this multiplayer games as a service front, maybe we will see this shake up. And if we do, then I'm willing to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're wrong. Maybe this can shake up. But this is not I won't call this damning, but I think it's certainly, like you said, it's indicative of a few things that don't make it seem like it's easy to do this.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say is that the one good thing we should think about here is I think that this doesn't necessarily say a ton about how important single player games are, because if people are spending 1,000 hours a year on Apex but 200 hours a year on single player games, I think we're okay, because that same 20% of the whole that we're looking at is 200 hours of single player, 800 hours of Destiny or Fortnite. So you break that out over everything, right? That's a lot of Fortnite and 10 single player games, or one Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but still.
Sure.
So I think it's concerning for newer games in this space. The one good thing is that I think it does leave a lot of room in that 20% for here's your 20-hour Banishers playthrough,
Sure. I think the only other thing that comes from this is that seeing that people play the same games over and over again will lead you to believe that even if you want to do something new and you're willing to make something new, it's not going to be new. It's going to drive publishers even further to dig further into sequels and spinoffs, so that they can have we're still making something new, so that we can try and have a new way to break in and make sure that we either get a part of a market or hold on to a part of the market that might otherwise eventually get bored and fall off. But that means that there's going to be a lot less push towards new IP, which we've already seen, arguably. So, and I say arguably because I think there's still been a relatively healthy amount of new IP, but there's also been in the AAA sphere specifically a lot of push towards staying towards sequels and things like that. Whereas most new IP we've seen has been odd AA games, are games that are technically AAA, but they come from studios that are always doing something different, like Elden Ring being a good example of that. So we'll see. We are going to go ahead and go into a couple of questions. We're going to try and get to them, as many of them as we can, within the next 15 minutes or so. So the first one we have here is one that Chris can be a little more answering to, because it is the other game that I decided to download earlier when I got on there, and that is Sweet Arisen Jones taking to Twitter at Triangle SQRD is our Twitter, if you want to go over there. He says, how sick is Dragon's Dogma 2? And tell Chris his, quote, main pawn will get no love from me. If he can't take the time to even give it a name, I assume he doesn't care, or he doesn't care, outfit, or train them at all. No quest reward either, question mark. And then Kanye nodding his head just in disapproval.
So 3 things, actually. I didn't know that I was naming my pawn main pawn when I named it main pawn. I thought that was telling me that this was my main pawn. Okay. And second of all, I did give a quest reward on the last time I played, and I was giving away 2,000 gold. So I feel like I was pretty generous. You were just late.
So speaking to that, I did download Dragon's Dogma 2. That was the other title that I grabbed while I was looking through what you had bought. So with that in mind, I do think I will try and dive into Dragon's Dogma 2, though I never did play Dragon's Dogma 1. I watched somebody play a little bit of it, and I know Ryan was a big fan of Dragon's Dogma 1. I noticed that you've not kept playing it. So I'm curious to see, what's your opinion on the game, and can you give a short reason as to why you think other games were able to take your attention?
I say this with all the love in the world because I do want to go back to that game, but I think it's a bad good game.
Can you give a little bit more into that?
Yeah, I think it's really good, but I think there's a lot of things that suck about it.
Like what?
And like how, like, I appreciate the fact that they want you to explore and they want you to fast travel. But for me, and again, I don't have a ton of experience about it. Please don't send me a message and be like, well, if you do this and you turn on this pyre, you can fast travel back. I didn't do that stuff. So my first day with Dragon's Dogma 2 was I'm going to go try and do this mission and explore, and then spending 2 hours going, I don't know how to get back to where I need to go. And that it was that simple.
Fair enough.
I liked it a lot, but it was one of those things where I'm like, I want to play Dragon's Dogma. Okay, I'm going to play Dragon's Dogma. You know what? I think I'd rather play Final Fantasy VII. I do want to get back to it. I thought it was really fun. It's just one of those things where I think this, and I think you could say the same thing about the first one, is they're good games, but they're bad.
Now, when you say bad, do you really mean like they're good games that are so obtuse that they make you frustrated with them sometimes?
No, maybe it's one of those things, right? Like Deadly Premonition is a bad game.
That's good.
Fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think this is the same.
I never played it, but I know people love it.
It's fucking fantastic. Okay. And I think that's the same thing here, where it's like Dragon's Dogma 2 is really good. And I can see why people like that. But if you don't like it, you do not like it. And I don't want to, again, I'm not saying I don't like it, but I can 100%. Just the fact that I didn't know that I was naming my main pawn because the game at that moment was not 100% clear to me that I was naming him. I'm not sitting here telling you that it wasn't obvious. I'm sitting here telling you that when I was doing it, I didn't realize what I was doing.
Yeah.
So take that for what you will.
There you have
but
it.
I really do hope
I
you
will.
like it.
I will hopefully get back around to it, or hopefully I'll get around to it. Chris may get back around to it, and I'll have to give my judgment on this series. So I'm excited to at least try and break into it. It does seem like an interesting game, but I can see reasons as to why it may pull me off. But I'm thinking it's going to be more of a time and place game where I'm going to have to be in the right mood, and if I am in the right mood, it's going to click so well with me. And if I'm not in the right mood, I'm going to be like, eh.
Look,
so. Trying to be grace, I give the game a little grace.
Yeah, I was surprised you didn't download Balatro or Ultros.
Dude,
I thought you were going to.
I almost downloaded Balatro. Like, it was sitting there, and I was like, man, I could totally get this right now. The problem with Balatro is that that's a game I could see becoming my next 3 weeks. And only that. And I'm still kind of wanting to play around with going to Crisis Core, and I'm like, don't want to get lost in Balatro. And look, I'm not giving the full answer. The reality is I may turn my PlayStation on tomorrow and be like, fuck it, I'm just downloading Balatro. It's a very real chance of that. But I'm trying to keep a little bit of a plan intact of what I want to play next. I'm trying to always be 2 games ahead of what I want to play while I'm playing something, so that I'm like, when I get done with this, because like I knew when I was playing Banishers, it's like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and then Resistance Retribution. So then when I was playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it's like, okay, Resistance Retribution and then Crisis Core. And then I got a little frustrated with 7. I was like, I want a little bit of time away from it. Those characters in that game. So I'm going to do one other game in between it. But Dragon's Dogma 2 may be too big of a game. I'm unclear right now if I want to have that big of a gap. So I'm trying to be a little more disciplined with my gaming.
Listen to the heart of the cards, Brett.
Damn, you're going to get me with that Yu-Gi-Oh! Ass quote right there. That's...
I had a moment with the heart of the cards in Marvel Snap, and I was tweeting about it, and a bunch of content creators were like, yeah, that's the heart of the cards, baby. So I did this thing where there are 2 cards, Hobgoblin and Green Goblin. They both are negative. So I had both of them in my deck, and just pure luck, I put the one that gives you -3 on this location that gives your next card the same power as the card you played. And I happened to hit the other negative card out of my whole deck. So it was one of those like, heart of the cards, baby. So then I pull that card out. It's normally -8. It has -11 power because I got lucky and added that. So easy W. Believe in the heart of the cards.
Easy dub. That's how it works. All right, so we got another question here. This one comes from one of our patrons and longtime listeners, Mr. Rude Days 93. And he says, closing in on Summer Games Fest, which is not too far away, and all of those showcase goodies, what are your top 3 announced or unannounced games that you are most excited to see trailers for? And he goes on to say unannounced games can be like the rumor games from a Bend or Sucker Punch, for example. So it's kind of either games that we know are around or games that we really hope to be around, even if we don't necessarily know exactly what they are. So Chris, I'll give the floor to you. 3 games that you would want to see at Summer Game Fest.
Haunted Chocolatier, Mina the Howler, Hollow Knight Silksong.
Yeah, so my top 3 is Silksong, even though part of me wants them to show it and then say it'll be next year, so Chris can't get that that Metacritic score. Sorry, Chris, I'm being petty.
I get it.
So with that in mind, Hollow Knight Silksong continues to be one of those games where it's just like, I love the first game so much, I really want to play the second one, and I'm trying not to rush them, but it's getting harder and harder to do that by the day because it's been announced for so long. I think the other 2 that I would go with is I really want to see Ghosts of Tsushima's sequel, follow-up, or whatever. And if it's not that, I want to see what Sucker Punch is working on. I think it's pretty clear that it's a Ghost of Tsushima follow-up because it was a very large game. The game did incredibly well, and almost surprisingly so. And then it did so well that Sony's even greenlit a movie adaptation. So if you think about all that together, it seems to paint a picture of that's where they would obviously go. Sucker Punch also has a tendency to make a game and then do a sequel that capitalizes on every single thing that the first game did by making it be even better almost every single time. They are the kings of fucking sequels, dude. Sly 2 is so fucking good. Infamous 2 is so fucking good. And I can only imagine what we're going to get from a Ghost of Tsushima 2. The last one I'd say... let's see. If I'm going announced games, this is going to sound weird for some people because this is a PlayStation podcast. I want to see Fable gameplay. I want to see real gameplay because I am not totally convinced that this Fable is going to bring anything to the table that is remotely what I want out of a Fable game. And I can pretty confidently say that because the only Fable games that have actually given me what I want out of Fable is the first game, which is pretty bad. Fable 2 is okay. There's problems I have with it, and there's things I like about it. And Fable 3 is its own thing that does something interesting, but doesn't necessarily capitalize on what I loved about Fable. So, yeah, those are my 3. I'm excited, and I'm always looking for a reason to play my Xbox or do something, and Xbox already did a lot of that with their developer direct this year. And I think, Avowed looks really good. So that would have been there if we wouldn't have seen a lot of Avowed. I'm already sold on Avowed. I don't need to see it again. I'm good.
Yeah. It's an Obsidian game. I respect the Black Rock.
So Chris, you slid back there and you grabbed something. What's going on here?
I did. I just picked this up at the game store.
Fucking Fable, man. Yeah. Hell yeah.
It was a good call out.
I love that game.
I found it with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 on Xbox. So I grabbed that one. And then Vanquish I have on PS3 now too. So pretty sick.
Hell yeah, man. All right. Well, we have enough time, I think, for one more question. I'm sorry, guys. So hopefully we'll be there. We don't have a Velvet's Corner this month or this week. I guess so far we haven't had a lot. I'm going to choose to go with one that we kind of brushed up on earlier. If we didn't get you this week, we'll try and pull in anything for next week. The last one we're going to go with here is from longtime listener, longtime patron, No Fate. Over on Twitter, he says, "Since you started podcasting, how much has it improved your characteristics? Has it made you more confident? Feel like the life and soul of the party? Better with social skills and a natural at presentation, etc." So, Chris, you're a little closer to you becoming a podcaster and kind of seeing how it changes aspects of how you can dig into certain parts of your personality. What would you say doing this has made more obvious about yourself? And do you think it's specifically improved anything, or do you think it's just allowed you to show what you already kind of had going more confidently?
No, ironically, I think becoming a podcaster has made me quieter in my daily life. Because I don't know. I guess it's hard maybe for you. You probably don't know as well, but like I don't talk very much. You probably don't get that sense because you're not around me on a daily basis and our conversations are in text. But like I can go full days without speaking a word and be totally fine. And I think this is just not exacerbated is the wrong word, but it does fit here where it's like I have these conversations with you. Like this 2 hours that we spend together every week is more conversation than I want to have for the whole week. So by the time we're done here, like I'm kind of good, you know. The only thing that I think it does do is it makes me more informed. So like even the example I was giving with Sean and Sea of Thieves and Game Pass, there was that pretentious part of me was like, if you knew what I knew, you would know that's not going to happen. You know? And obviously I didn't say that to him, I'm not an asshole, but there was that inclination of being like, no, I read all this stuff and I know who the publisher of Sea of Thieves is, so that's not going to happen. But, you know, that's it for me. It's really just made me a little bit quieter because I get my talking out, and then that little bit of pretension of like, no, I'm pretty sure I know better than you in that aspect, you know?
Yeah, I have to deal with that latter sometimes where someone will be saying something and I just kind of have to not give in to correcting them because it can come off as a dick hole, like a dick move, even though I'm not trying for it to be. A guy at work today hollered across the warehouse when I was walking through and said, "Did you hear they're making a Need for Speed Underground 3?" And I said, "Well, that sounds fake, but no." And I was like, well, I probably could have said that a better way, but the reality is like that's probably not true.
Yeah,
and he's just somebody on the internet said it and he's taking it at face value and be like, oh dude, they're making one because someone on the internet said it. So so that happens. But no, this is weird. This question's dual-sided for me because I think it's made me more confident in front of cameras. I started doing this podcast around the same time that I started doing live shows more often for my band. Early days, we were still doing big moves, going out of town to play shows and stuff when this was first going on, and getting a little more confident just in front of the camera helped translate into being more confident in front of a crowd because a camera is the implication of a crowd. And the implication that you're going to put this out there for a crowd of people to judge you.
Great. Now you've just given me a whole thing about podcasting. I'm going to turn my camera off.
It's the implication, Chris.
Yeah.
But this podcasting has both made me more confident. It's made me more obvious of character flaws, or character flaws is probably not the right wording for it. It's made me more. It's made me more aware of certain tendencies that I have I have had to work on over time, and for different reasons, like my propensity to want to say what I have to say so much that I start to overtalk the other person or not allow them a chance to really respond. And earlier on in the show, I think I had that worse. And every now and then, now I still feel like, hold your slow down for just a second. You can let that person finish what they're saying. I know that in my brain, what I think I have to say is like very hot.
Yeah.
And I got to get it while you got to strike while the iron's hot, but I can wait. And I didn't do it today, but I don't know if you've noticed for about the last 4 weeks, I have had a pen and paper, and as you're talking, to help keep my thoughts in line, I've been writing little sentences or little one-word things that can help me go back to a topic so that I can give you the room to actually express what you want. And so it's something I'm constantly working on. And I'm also, I've generally been a pretty well sociable person. I think that this has just made sure that I've been able to stay sociable, because after the podcast is done, it's not the podcast itself so much as it's the interacting with people once the podcast is out. So I don't feel weird when people come and start talking to me about something. I'm very open to the idea of random people coming to me that I may not be aware of at the time, and being open to hearing what they have to say and trying to take their opinion with a little bit more of a, like, okay, put myself in their shoes. What are they viewing? What do they think is important? And that's been helpful. So podcasting's interesting. I don't necessarily think that being a podcaster means that you have to be great at other aspects of these things. But Chris, I want to turn the question just a little bit and end the show on this. When you were given the opportunity to start coming into podcasting as someone who doesn't really like to talk all that much, what drove you to want to fill in whenever Saul had his issue? Because that's really what happened. It was opportunity. We were doing midweek, so that was new, but a much smaller audience, much lower stakes, all those different things. When it came time for Saul to have to step away from this due to his health complication, you were kind of chomping at the bit to have the opportunity to step in here. So as someone who doesn't really like to talk that much and is very, quite content with being quiet throughout the week, what was it about podcasting or this podcast or whatever that drew you to want to attempt it?
I don't know. I think it's different. Like, if you had just come to me off the street, right? I would have been like, no, that's weird. But like, I like podcasting. I like talking about video games, and like, by that point, much more now. But like, we were good friends, so it was like one of those things where it's like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. Because at the start it was just like, hey, do you want to fill in for a couple episodes? And then it's all left. So, and then I just kept doing this show with you. But it was one of those things where it was, hey, you're just filling in, and then, hey, we had fun, like, why don't we do 3? And then it's like, hey, Saul's leaving, so it's now just us. It wasn't this like crazy transition, but I think it helped that by the time that I took over the show, it was like, oh, I'm just talking with one of the people one of my closest friends at this point. Like, I just talk to one of my boys all day. Like, it's whatever. The worst part about this show is that there's some times where I'm like, especially now that we're working on something else on the side, where I'm like, and again, like, I consider you a close friend. Like, I'll invite you to my wedding, all that kind of shit. But like, there are still times where I'm like, does he even like me? Like, and it's like, and like, I'll send you messages, and like, I've always said it to you, and I say it to everyone I know. It's like, I don't expect a response immediately, but like, there are some times where I'll message you and be like, oh, it's like a little late. Like, you're gonna get mad at me, and it's just like, it's like that small kind of stuff. And I think it would have been worse had we not had like an almost instant. Once we did the House of 1,000 Corpses episode, I would follow you through fire, so it didn't matter. But
I feel the same, Chris.
It was really that episode.
It's a real bonding moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it was just that. It was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's an opportunity to like help you out, and then Blake murdered midweek matinee, and then watched all the MCU movies, which I'd been begging him to do. No, but in all seriousness, it was just like, it was an opportunity to do something that I liked. Like, I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts, so it's one of those things where it's cool to do that. And then seeing some of the smaller stuff, like even people I know, like taking it more seriously. Like, I remember when I started, like, I was embarrassed, honestly. Like, I'll tell that straight up, like, being down here, like, I didn't want to record if people were here or awake. Like, I didn't want that. But now we're at the point where it was like once I went to Texas and my parents realized that I didn't pay for it, again, I appreciate everyone on Patreon who was able to make that happen. But like, once I was like, yeah, I didn't pay anything for that. Like, that was paid for by the show so that we could do something for the show. It became more legitimate to the point where my parents like have it on the schedule. Like, Chris is recording at 7:30, leave him the fuck alone. And they'll know, like, my mom's like, hey, I'm going to the tax office. Like, I won't see you tonight. Have fun recording. So like, it bought that little bit of legitimacy to the people in my life, which made it fun. But even like I love using that one example, because even my boss, like my old boss at the job I just left, when I told him like I need Tuesday nights off because I record a podcast, he was like making fun of me, and I was like, yeah, well, my podcast did pay and put me up in Texas for a week, so I don't really know what you're talking about, but I'm going to take my Tuesday nights. And I remember even at spare time, like when I started this show, I've gone through a lot of jobs, funnily enough, but one of the things I said to my boss is, she was like, how important are Tuesday nights for you? And I was like, well, if one of these was going to be my job, it wouldn't be this. So I'm going to take Tuesday nights off.
Yeah.
And I never worked a Tuesday. So, that's what it was. It was just evolving into that.
Well, what I like about that is that the reality of Saul and I starting the show to begin with is just this thing of like, every time Saul and I would hang out, we'd spend about 2 to 3 hours bullshitting, talking about different things happening in the games industry and with each other, and having our own arguments or thoughts and discussions around what was happening.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like this thing where it's like, why don't we just do that for other people to listen to if they find value in it? And we've been lucky that people have found value in it.
Yeah.
And that's, I like that, because I think, like I think I mentioned, at this point, it's just I'm happy with what we have. Like, if the show grows and blows up and does something big, that's awesome. And I would love for that. But I'm also quite content with what we have. We have a nice listener base who, helps us pay for these things and cover costs for things. And that's awesome. We were able to get Chris a new mic and new preamp and everything all off his dime. And those are just little things that are like, great, this is something that we can continue to do that's fun, that does have a potential to become something bigger. But if it doesn't, I'm quite happy with the fact that I have a really good excuse to sit down once a week and talk with you, more so than the text that y'all don't know, Chris and I talk almost all day, every day, realistically. Yeah. I mean, it's not all day, but we talk often in spurts throughout the day.
We talk often enough that occasionally I'll say something to Brett and he'll just respond with okay. And I'll legitimately be like, what did I do? Because it was funny. Actually, it was funny because you said the other day, you were like, that's fine. And I was like, if I listen to Sadie, you're mad at me.
Yeah, you did. You 100% said that. Yeah. And I'm like, no, that's quite literally, that's fine. That was it.
Dude, you got to understand, I'm not allowed to say that word.
You're not allowed to say okay, or that's
fine. I can't say fine. Because even if she goes, how are you? And I say, yeah, I'm fine. She'll be like, what's wrong?
What does that mean?
I'll be like, dude, sometimes I'm just fine.
Yeah.
If I'm a man and I'm sad, I will probably kill myself. So if I'm fine, I'm fine. Listen, 40, it's not good for us out there. But look, the reality is the podcast is very fun.
It is very fun, and I'm glad that we were able to do that. So, Sean, thank you for the question. We appreciate your long-time patronage. I love that you've been listening to the show for so long. I mean, I'm pretty sure you've been here since like a couple of months into doing the show. So this is like, you're like 6 years into this with us. We really appreciate that. That takes a lot of commitment on both sides. So we really appreciate that. But I'm going to wrap the show up. Remind everyone, if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Triangle SQRD. You can find us in the link below in the description at our Discord, which you can hop into, talk to us about the episode, what we talk about within it, push back, give your own thoughts on different things. Like maybe you disagree about how live service games are. If you do, let us know in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, or hit us up in the Discord. We have an open chat for that. We have spots where you can request things that you'd like us to talk about, give us questions like some of the people did today, and just generally hang out and talk with us in general chat about all things gaming and movies and music and kind of whatever you're into. A lot of our patrons are over there, and those patrons went over to patreon.com/Nartech and gave as little as $1 per month to help support this show, and we are very thankful for those. So without further ado, we always wrap the show up by thanking our patrons, and we're going to start that off with Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Matt Tubbs, Easton328, Aztec King, Lecheon69, The Lord Corgi, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Cypher Primus, Kyle Grimm, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villiobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Donovan Williams, Matthew Green, and Sean Santaroon. Thanks to each and every one of you, and see you next week.